You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Muller.
And this is Ken Muller. Welcome to our show, all about real estate with Ken and Jane. Today, Jane, we have as our special guest Jason Kaplan, the president of Kaplan Builders. Jason?
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So Kaplan Builders has a very rich history. We'd love for you to take us back in time to how it all started with your grandfather.
Sure, absolutely. So the history actually dates back when my family came here from Europe in 1952. Both of my grandparents and my father were both Holocaust survivors, so they were able to escape the, they were there for liberation, came to America back in 1952, settled down in Toms River, New Jersey, actually on an egg farm. And my grandfather being, not an educated man, but very entrepreneurial nature, got together with a couple other, they call them kind of refugees, that they were trying to be a little entrepreneurial, put their money together, built a house, and then saw that that was a much better business than selling eggs and chickens on a farm. So they focused on that while they still had the farm and did that. And it was probably less of a formal business, but they would sort of invest and build a couple homes, started down in Ocean County, and then eventually moved up to build a couple homes locally in East Brunswick. And then I guess, my father sort of being more educated, attending Rutgers University, getting to a master's degree level in civil engineering, understood the business, really understood marketing, understood the real estate business, and really expanded the business to the next level. So he finished school in the early 60s, which was a great time for real estate and development in New Jersey. It was, after the Korean War, and there were, I think, a few big builders in the country, so like the Levitts, who you may know from Levittown, Long Island, and there used to be a Levittown in South Jersey, which they changed the name, I think, to Willingboro, and in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania is the one I came.
Yeah. So his I think Levitt's whole theory was affordable housing for the GIs and all the the veterans that would come back, where he would build like a smaller Cape Cod house. I think you'll see some similar homes in East Brunswick and North Brunswick and Old Bridge, where they would deliver homes for a few $1,000s. So where Levitt was building thousands of homes a year, there were builders like my father and grandfather who came home and they would build a couple hundred a year. So nothing in comparison to them, but they saw the opportunity. There was the growth into the suburbs as the trains and the automobiles and everything, became more affordable, and all these GIs came back and wanted to start families and build some housing out in the suburbs. So my father really took it from there. What he understood was the opportunity of building bigger homes. He liked building for sale homes and providing homes to these, to the people that wanted it, rather than focusing on multifamily rental homes. So they were selling homes. I think he said they would start at about $7,500 a year, which is still is unbelievable.
But then again, the average salary back in the 50s and 60s, it might have been $10,000 a year, or so it was I guess all in
relative. But if you think about it, if your salary is $10,000 a year, it's less than 1 year's salary to buy a home. Now, the average salary in New Jersey is under $100, and the average home is $800.
Or $800, right.
So.
That's pretty cool. I guess in actuality that the suburbs actually were created by the movements in maybe I guess the 40s, the 50s, the 60s with the migration that caused the demand for the homes, because there used to be either cities or rural, right? And the suburbs kind of created you guys. People like your granddad, your father created the suburbs, what we know them today to be.
Right, quality of life. People moved out to the suburbs because they wanted the white picket fences, a backyard, raise a family,
have a dog, and
play little league, and create these towns where they were commuting at first, and then the office building, I think, boom of the 80s kind of moved a lot of those offices out of Newark, out of the big city centers, so that there was a full quality of life and people weren't commuting, although the commuting's obviously stayed until this day. So what was unique about my father was that he saw this vision for bigger. There was nothing back in the 60s and 70s that we now call a PUD, or a planned unit, or planned unit development, where he understood that it takes the same amount of time to bring through the entitlement process 10 homes as it did to bring 1,000 homes. And at that point, you could buy farms that were hundreds of acres. So he would look at it and say it would take him the same effort, may cost a few dollars more, but it was in those terms, it wasn't crazy amounts of money. So he went in and to his credit, he approved some of these larger communities, and he's probably approved in his lifetime more 1,000+ communities than probably any other builder in the state. So he right around the corner from here in North Brunswick, he built Hidden Lake, which was really, it was a PUD before there was such thing as a PUD. The zoning on that was just single family, and he cluster development, brought in new product type townhomes, which didn't really exist at that time, and condo ownership, and all these kind of different things rather than the historical sort of single family development that really dominated the suburbs and stuff through the 50s and 60s.
I love the Hidden Lake. I sold money home there. The floor plan is very, very welcomed by a lot of buyers, especially young buyers.
It looks pretty common now, but I think when he did it, he had ideas that he found down out in California, and then he loved bringing planners and architects from around the country to bring some innovation here. And I remember he would tell me stories when he would go to the planning board, and the boards would, I don't know what your experience is going to the planning boards, they don't want to hear about variances or variations or anything to plans. And he walked in with 500 variances, and he told them he'd bring something unique, and which he did. North Brunswick was sort of the sister community next to East Brunswick at that point, but he really wanted to create something unique, which won every award at that time. Now you drive through it, and it looks pretty common, but at that point it was very cutting edge, unique, and innovative for its time.
Just like East Brunswick, there was a time Riders Lane was a dirt road, and it was like a farm road. Right?
Route 18
was
only
Route
one
18.
lane.
The Route 18 was built.
Yeah.
Nothing, a little 2-lane road that just expanded. So he said some of the first homes he built were actually right on Racetrack Road, which still stand there were like the splits or the bi-levels that he built back in the 50s.
Yeah, and you had a few properties
I
sold and rented a few
Racetrack.
properties. So exactly.
Probably one of
Maybe
your
you probably
guys.
sold the Kaplan home.
Yes.
Yeah,
quite a few on Racetrack.
Yes,
I sold.
that was
quite
one
a
of the
few.
original parts, I think.
Wow.
Of that era.
And it's interesting. I guess the model back then was to build Cape Cod homes. Now it seems like a lot of new developments, most builders either want to build a house bigger, or humongous, because it doesn't. But I don't see, or maybe
the trends change. I think it started off like in the 50s with a small Cape Cod. It was a 500-600 square foot house. The basic thing was 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, a bathroom. Then I think it got to the split or the bi-level house.
Yeah.
That was sort of like the next level.
Yeah.
And then I think in the 70s with the innovation in lumber and building techniques, they went to the center hall colonial, which was, I think, has always been the most popular. I think in the 80s, more modern contemporary stuff came about, went back to traditional. But you're right, because of the cost of building and the justification, the homes got bigger, went to the McMansions in the 90s. But then now I think it's more about efficiency and quality, and people want, gorgeous kitchens and all the stuff, and they'd rather see the money in there than just having 2-story living rooms that don't get used, or formal dining rooms that are used twice a year. So the trends change, but the basic model of the house is, there's still certain things that people want in there, in order for resale and value.
Right, because the value in the 50s and the 60s was maybe you didn't have the master bath necessarily in the master bedroom. You might have had one closet. I think the first home my parents had, they just had one closet for both of them, one basic closet with two wooden racks on it, and that was the extent of their closet.
It amazes me when I drive through Hidden Lake, and you see back at that point, land was so available that he was building on bigger lots. Now you'll see those homes that he built in the 70s knocked down, and he'll throw, people will build their own custom, mansions on them.
Yes.
So I guess that's the trend for a while where you can justify it.
Sure.
Yep.
So your dad really started, I guess, after he got a master's in civil engineering, and then he kind of worked with your granddad in the business.
I think, if you had asked him at the point, he would have said he's been working since he was 12 years old. But I think he formally, he was working while he was in college, but he really grew the business, understood, he separated my grandfather from any partners he had at that point, sort of established the Kaplan brand as its own name. And he was one of the first ones that actually said, it's our name, there's value, there's some credence to it, instead of just calling it, New Jersey Builders or something like that. So I think it was originally called Kaplan and Sons, as my uncle joined the business also to, really blow up. And then he built the community. They focused on residential through the 60s, 70s. In the 80s, as the real estate market really grew, he expanded into every facet of real estate, from office to industrial to, he actually had a modular plan, because the plan at that point was to grow the residential part of the business down the East Coast, and he saw the only way of really growing it was to build these modular plants, and you can build more efficiently. But unfortunately, the change in economy and market of the late 80s kind of changed the whole business plan there. So,
Right.
Yes. Yep.
Wow. When I learned your dad was born in the concentration camp.
He was actually literally born.
Yeah.
That's the
He's a real anomaly. I mean,
that's an anomaly, and it's like a miracle. And it's not only is it resemble the American dream, but what they overcame just to get to America, and then they made the American dream. They made it
into reality.
But just getting to America was he had both his hands tied and chained before he even had a chance.
Incredible story. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. He shouldn't exist by any historical means. And whoever studied the history said there's no explanation for you. You shouldn't really be here right now. So I think that kind of built the drive and the fight in him to fight the towns, build what he wanted, and go. I don't think to him it wasn't. It was more about like this is a challenging industry, and he always loved the challenge and everything to it.
I think the Hollywood should write a movie about him.
Sure,
they're gonna be really inspire a lot of people. That's true.
Because it's a true story, and it's really without having to alter. That would be a fabulous movie.
It is. It is. We actually hired a biographer to create for a family keepsake, just to get a story, because a lot of it, his memories, he had some memories, but he was such a young, baby at the time that some of it may have been what he actually remembered versus what he was told. So it doesn't make any sense. He has a story similar to a Schindler type figure that saved him and his family.
Oh, I see. Yeah, and to be a baby and born in those conditions where babies we're so sensitive about the warmth, the cold, the overprotection, and to be born in the most hostile of environments and with all the brutality around it, and to be able to be healthy enough, aside, just it's
survived.
Yeah. It is. It is. He's we called him a survivor through and through. He just passed away back in November. So but he just left a true legacy and everything that he accomplished. He was just a fighter through his whole life through the end. So,
but he had a good solid 83
years.
Which is
so inspiring.
He was absolutely to our whole family and to our whole business and
I think
and the industry.
To the whole world. That's so inspiring.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah,
and I guess according to the bio, your dad built his first retail establishment back in 1961 in the AMP.
Yes,
in Woodbridge.
So it's actually the center still exists. If you drive by it, it's as you're going north on Route 1, just past Menlo Park Mall. I think there's like an off-track betting in that we're used to the AMP. He always bragged that I think it was the first A&P that he got to pay over $1 per square foot, which is it's pretty funny. But the center still exists. We don't own it anymore, but it's been remodeled a few times, and none of the original tenants. But it was
still pretty cool that that footprint is still there. They didn't.
I think that's what he really loved about real estate. When as a child driving around, he would always point out,
drive around.
Right. I built that. I did that, and I accomplished this. And there wasn't a road where he was dangerous to drive with because he was always looking the wrong, never in front of him, always looking.
You'd have to take him to maybe California or Hawaii or somewhere where he couldn't.
Then it would give him new ideas of new products. So he wasn't. We never let him drive.
All right, well said. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back after these messages. Okay, welcome back to our show. We're joined today by Jason Kaplan, the president of Kaplan Builders. So, Jason, we were talking about some of your father's establishments. He built a retail. The first one, I guess, was in 1961. Mm-hmm. You also, in the break, you also mentioned that your dad was also innovative in building age-restricted developments. I guess that whole concept evolved in the 50s, 60s.
Yeah, right. So what he envisioned, he didn't invent age-restricted housing that exists, and there was thousands of units down in Ocean County. I guess that was the trend to for them because of the cost of living is a little less there. But what he did a study, and what it showed was there was only a certain amount that it would attract, and whatever you build would sort of take its share from that. What he kind of figured was to build like a super high-end luxury product and not steal from the existing demand, but create a new demand of that people would move down there for the lifestyle and not just because it's a cheaper place to live. So the original Four Seasons concept that I know Hovnanian ended up using the brand name and sort of building across the country, he did, where you had the beautiful gated waterfall entrance with a golf course and oversized clubhouse and just high-end family, single-family homes that were geared more towards it instead of the kind of real bread and butter homes that were traditionally there. So it was a unique concept that he invented, and that was just one of the concepts that he innovated, along with a lot of other big communities that we built throughout the state, including Hidden Lake, which I mentioned, Raintree and Freehold was a big community built. Lemaire and Sayreville is a.
Right.
I know that one too.
We know that one. She's done
done
business
Great.
there. That's a big. That's a big community.
Yeah, big over 1,500 units.
Yes,
we actually
yes.
just completed the last unit there after a long time, and I'm trying to think. We built a ton of Cinnaminson. There's a community that we built of over 1,000 homes. Oakwood, which I know you had mentioned in Old Bridge, over 1,000 homes, and a ton of communities around the state that were larger. PUDs.
I won't say the address, but there's one home that I know you guys built in East Brunswick on a particular road. That's my favorite house in East Brunswick. I'm not going to say. I don't even want to say the road, but it's because I don't want to give any publicity to anybody to go by. But it's just a beautiful brick.
Oh yeah.
It's like it looks like when I look at that, my eyes. I've gone by there maybe 1,000 times because I live in the near. But it's like it would be my favorite house if I could have
my most favorite.
Our castle of East Brunswick. Built by. I don't even know if Kaplan can take credit for that. That was my sister that probably can take most of the credit.
Well, she's got the Kaplan brains
the
and
DNA.
the detail and
Yes.
to do an outstanding job.
Yeah.
So let's turn now. One of the biggest things with all your dad's accomplishments, he was very passionate about affordable housing. That was like his big thing. He could have just been an ordinary builder and said, you know what, I just want to build as much as I can and sell it to whomever. But he had a real passion for making sure there was a fair playing field for those that either had less income or moderate income, to ensure that everybody had a chance, an opportunity to live in any community they chose to.
Right. So I think that, and he did believe in that. I mean, like I said in the beginning, the initial reason that he got into the housing, or the demand, really came from the military that came back, and just building. It's not the same affordable housing that you think of today, where it's income restricted, but just being able to build homes for people that can afford it. He didn't want to build the big mega mansions that were, to the certain elite. So I think that was, what you're leading to is a major lawsuit that he had in what is Old Bridge now, but was called Madison Township back in the day, where he had a large piece of property that he was developing. The town, I guess, made the process very difficult. What he did, I don't know whether they were trying to be, just restrictive, or there was no per se like actual income restricted housing in there, but he was trying to build housing that was affordable to these people. And what they did was they put bigger lot zoning on it, where you would have to build bigger homes, and he knew that wouldn't be affordable to other people. So he got some of the I think it was a church in Newark and some other active groups that showed that the town was being discriminatory towards affordability and allowing homes that were affordable. So while the town really didn't work with him, he ended up suing the town. It went all the way up to the highest court in New Jersey. I believe it went there either 2 or 3 times until the town finally worked with him. I think the judge said that if they don't issue the zoning for the property, the judge said he was going to issue 2,000 building permits for the property, on site, so that they couldn't stop it. He just saw it as a way for the town to stop, building housing for affordability. So that was not that eventually was settled in court. I think it took 12 or 13 years, and that eventually was led to the affordable housing, or the COA, the Mount Laurel Doctrine, which is a suit that was happening similarly down in Mount Laurel Township. Right,
and I think the Mount Laurel one that started in '75 only.
Yes. Yeah.
But getting back to before we get onto that, it's very interesting because I learned something that you can't find in the text, and that your dad's concept. He didn't go to the township of Old Bridge, as it's known now, and say, "Hey, I want to build this many normal housing and this many affordable." He just designed it. He complied with the zoning, just that his lots and his homes were undersized. So he was totally in compliance with zoning. But somebody in planning or zoning just looked at it and said, "Wait a minute, why are these being built it's interesting how it even triggered it, because you think they would just say, "Oh, your footprint is well within our confines, so we don't care. You go ahead and
I think it was the opposite. By the time you designed the house and they put the setback, I think they mixed the front setbacks and the side setbacks. So basically, you couldn't build a house. They basically took the property and said, "Oh, you can't really build anything on there." So he said that's impossible, and then it became like a fight with them, and they were like, "Well, it doesn't fit the zoning. You can't have a building permit," and it really restricted. And that's when he told the town, "You're trying to keep out."
Because they saw too many little clusters, and they wanted a bigger lot and a bigger house, and so it would limit less quantity of homes, and
bigger, more expensive, less affordable stuff to bring in, more affordable housing. They just didn't want it.
Right. And it got appealed, and I guess it started at the New Jersey, the base level court, then it went to the appellate division, and then finally the Supreme Court ruled in his favor.
Correct. Yeah. He said he made a speech at the final hearing that when he started the process, he was just dating his wife, and then at the final hearing, he was celebrating the bar mitzvah of his daughter. So,
13 years, right? Right. He always ties in real estate to something with personal. You could be out on a Sunday drive, and he'll
absolutely.
He'll tie it in. That's great.
I just wonder, Red, is that because your dad took the township to court, and then they changed the name to Old Bridge? I feel they don't want to be associated with that, So you know what? Let me change my name.
Right.
I was always wondering why it was Madison, and now it's
I always wondered why they changed their name, right?
Right, good question. I've said that before, but at least it's not called the Madison Doctrine or the Old Bridge affordable housing.
Right. And then it was interesting because the research, even though that was your dad's case was integral in getting the whole affordable housing issue addressed, just like the Mount Laurel doctrine, that case in '75. But from my reading, there really, even though it was townships had to provide for the affordable housing, there was no teeth to the regulations. So it wasn't until like about 10 years later in 1985 that the court, I guess, established the FHA, the Federal Fair Housing Act, and that in turn established the Council on Affordable Housing, or known as COA. And then since then, COA started enforcing it and going after municipalities. I think at one point they had like 300 municipalities that they put into some type of agreement to.
That's right. And gave you a little teeth, and then builders would have, they call like a builder's remedy, where as a builder I can come into a town and say, you have a certain obligation. We can satisfy your obligation, but we have to build a certain amount of market rate housing. So we subsidize the affordable component by building some markets. So a lot of builders look at my father and say, "Oh, you created affordable housing, and you created this headache that now we have to build that the towns don't want, the people don't like." But in essence, he gave the ability to builders to build anything, because if I didn't have that hammer when I went to a town, most towns would just say, "We don't want any housing, so don't do it." But since they have this obligation to build affordable housing, it sort of opens the doors for builders to build something, and for towns to create, in effect, affordable housing, which I'm a big believer in, that every town should have a component. They shouldn't have these, towns that have no affordability to it at all.
Right. And there used to be, for the wealthier towns, there used to be something called regional contribution agreements, RCAs, as they're known in the industry, where a wealthy town could say, "Hey, I don't want any affordable housing in my backyard. So I'm going to give you X amount of dollars to a poor
fund that
would
and get moved to the poor towns.
To just push it away." But but in 2008, I guess the Fair Housing Act was amended to prohibit those RCAs from being.
Yeah, I think what happened was a lot of them were moving to areas and it wasn't getting spent right or wisely, or they were creating, housing that wasn't really the initial means. I think the intention of COA and the affordability was mixed use, build it, and all of a sudden these funds were getting built up, and there was tons of money, and there was no affordable housing being built. So I agree with that decision.
So now fast forward to 2023, now 2024. If we talk about towns like Short Hills, Alpine, Saddle River, Livingston, have you seen any indication that those those elite towns?
Personally, I live up in North Jersey, and we have seen it. I mean, less in it's hard to make the justification for economically for sale housing, but what we've seen is a lot of multifamily rental housing being built, and it has a affordable component. Or we've seen housing that's built that's 100% affordable due to subsidies from the state or other contributions that builders may have made. Because there's also, when you build commercial in towns, you have to make a contribution to the COA market too. So there are some subsidies within towns or buckets of money that to build it. So yes, I have seen in a lot of the towns that you mentioned affordable, mostly rental housing being built, and age restricted and veteran housing and some other stuff. So it's really you can see the results. It's not just not like it used to be where the towns would just fight and try to keep them out and a sense of unwant.
Right. I know.
I think in America, right, where I'm came to this country, right? Mm-hmm. It's all called American dream. Mm-hmm. How the American dream can be reality. People like your dad going through the education, go learn the new skills, a new language, and so on and so forth, right? I think the education is everything. It's better, it's good to give people food and fish, right?
Yes.
But better than that is teach them how to fish.
Absolutely.
So I believe education is the key. How can you ask them to change their future if they not allowed have the same education?
Yes.
Like your children or our children, some children should be equal in a way.
Agreed. And I think the perception of who's living in the affordable housing, there needs to be some education, because a lot of times we go to these towns and everybody thinks that it's going to attract the wrong element, riffraff, crime, and just a bad element to the town. But in actuality, what happens is we provide housing for the teachers, the policemen, divorced moms that can't afford it, and a lot of these things are filled up with housing for people that want to stay in town, have children. It like you said, it gives them an opportunity to get their legs beneath them and grow. And
absolutely.
And the salary can be maybe $80,000, $90,000 depending on the family size. So what people perceive as being qualifying is not necessarily like you're not making $10,000 or $20,000. You're making a decent salary.
It's not Section 8 housing. It's income restricted, and there's low affordability and moderate affordability. Right. Moderate affordability in an average town in New Jersey, could be 50, 60, 70,000.
Yes,
so.
Right, absolutely. Especially in New Jersey, which has a high cost of living. So we're all out of time. We're going to continue. Have you back next week to talk more about Kaplan. Thank you so much, Jason, for being our guest today. We'll see everyone next week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.